It's not just the impact of COVID-19, but many other factors such as equality and diversity, sustainability, customer power, and much more that we believe here at the Achieve a Leader Show is changing the makeup of the leader of tomorrow. Today, aspects such as remote leadership or the hybrid leader or the conscious leader are all new challenges emerging for the head of a business. In the past, his or her focus may have been simply on the two things of survival and profit of the business. Now there's much more to contend with in the present fast-changing world of business. So how are the leaders of tomorrow now learning what they need to know and to do? Well, who better to ask than the Pro-Vice Chancellor of Business and Enterprise at Teesside University, Professor Jane Turner. Welcome, Jane.
Thank you, Malcolm. Delighted to be here.
Jane, it's well known that the most successful leaders have a university background, traditional learning of leadership. But change is happening fast. So how are you at Teesside University adapting to ensure your leadership students have the new and right skills?
So we've adopted the Principles for Responsible Management Education. So that's a global movement that's transforming business and management education through research and leadership. And it's linked to the UN Sustainable Goals, which aims to encourage deeper discussion of social and environmental responsibility within the business and management school curriculum. So it's part of the UN Global Compact, and it directly supports the 17 UN Sustainable Development Goals by addressing topics like global inequality, gender equality, climate action, poverty, peace, and strong institutions. And our overall aim is to develop globally responsible leaders who have the resilience to operate morally, ethically in this ever-changing and ever-demanding world that we live in.
Okay, so where do you particularly see that those skill changes need to be made? I've mentioned, for example, remote leadership. Am I right? And what others?
Remote, certainly, and I think we've all been on the receiving end of that as a result of COVID, and many of us being home working and having to make sense of our relationships with colleagues and leading colleagues in that context. So that's accelerated for a change in approach to leadership, I think. I think it's important that our relationships are based on trust and that we actively engage with our staff and we motivate. I mean, looking into the world around us, we know the biggest disruptors, and we're seeing it on a daily basis now, it will come from technology. So the rise of the digitally connected world will be the greatest change for us, including AI, big data, automation, robotics. So there is a need to be much more innovative, risk-taking, collaborative, curious, but encouraging our teams to be more curious and for leaders not to feel threatened by that. Ability is, as I say, as we've seen recently, to scenario plan and experiment, but fundamentally to release people and trust them and find a way to deal with the ambiguity through communication. So yeah, the traditional hierarchical, what is still in many organizations, command and control focused on the bottom line, this kind of throws all of that up into the air, really. But fundamentally, it comes down to human beings trusting each other in the workplace.
So are we moving towards the leader having greater commercial skills rather than technical skills, as it says happening in the USA, where sales come first?
I'm not sure whether it's so much commercial skills in this country. There is certainly a shift in the skills set. And I would also always say that technical skills get a leader to a certain point, and then it's something much more impactful that needs to come into the fore for leaders to be successful in their role as leaders and in leading others in that response.
So how important do you think it is that aspiring leaders improve their emotional intelligence ability, or EQ skills, as say opposed to the technical skills? I say this because many of the leading recruiters that I've talked with around the world say they are seeing such a switch to EQ.
Yes, and I was, before coming to Teesside, I was an executive coach for 16 years. So I've had that privilege and opportunity to work very closely with a lot of CEOs, directors, chairs. And you'd often see that those leaders were very uncomfortable in their skin in those roles, often promoted beyond their level of competence because they had been promoted on their technical capability. And actually what is actually required in that senior role is much more that EQ ability. And the research constantly reinforces and shows us that EQ is twice as predictive of performance as IQ is. So I think it's absolutely crucial. And again, going back to my point around that human to human interaction, that's what people command of their leaders much more moving forward. And that will come from those that have the ability to be emotionally intelligent as a leader.
What are you especially proud about in the leadership learning that you deliver at Teesside University?
I think it goes back to the response I've just made around the principles of around management education, that it's very relevant to what we deliver, is very relevant to leaders' needs. It's applied, but it's very much underpinned by ethical and moral intent, but within the context of us addressing global issues, societal issues. So a lot of our leaders and developing leaders engage in community issues, societal issues, so that they really develop that humility, that understanding and that empathy, which again goes back to EQ, but that ability to interact and understand others, which is absolutely key.
Jane, this is the Achiever Leader Show, with the element of achiever being prominent as results are important. Apart from profit growth, what 3 things do you think that an achiever leader should focus on and be proud about achieving?
Well, linking back to that shift from technical capability to that ability to lead as an individual, and this is an overarching focus for me, is around building that self-awareness of themselves as a leader. So what are their core values? What drives them? What motivates them? And how do they manifest those behaviors in their day-to-day interactions with others, but for them as a leader, and what's their leader identity? So it should be a given that leaders have extremely strong and deep levels of self-awareness, but it's often not there, but it's fundamental. Achiever leaders should be focusing absolutely on the people as opposed to the profit. The people will enable profits to come if they are treated well. So it's that human element, which is so often so important, but so often it's overlooked. And I think the COVID crisis, for a time, and I do hope it continues, people have started to realise the importance of that human element and the human interaction. The second thing would be around the authenticity. Absolutely, achiever leaders focusing on, am I authentic in who I am and who I'm being, or am I acting out a performance here as a leader? Because followers will see straight through that. It's inauthentic, the trust is not there. And that leads me on to my final point. It's around focusing on building trust, caring about people, having the courageous conversations, but having the levels of trust there that enable you to do that. So the softer skills stuff that some might think are not going to lead to the outcomes or the profitable outcomes, but actually as leaders, we just need to better learn how to treat people well, and we will then get the best out of people.
Professor Jane Turner of Teesside University, thank you so much for that input into the Achiever Leader Show.
Thank you, Malcolm.